Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. And this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hey, this is Lynn.
And this is Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. We are your co-hosts, and let's get right into our topic for today, Imposter Syndrome. Let's get after it.
Dun, dun, dun. Imposter syndrome.
If you say that you've never experienced imposter syndrome, I actually don't know anybody who has honestly never experienced it. And actually, I find, and I don't know if you find this, but I find that the more productive a person is, the more likely they are to experience imposter syndrome. I actually believe that there's been research done on that as you come into this experience or this accolade or a new level of your business or professional career, that is when you're more likely to experience imposter syndrome, because you've reached this pinnacle, this moment of greatness, and now you can feel it possibly slipping away. And there's that fear of it slipping away and being accused of being a charlatan and never being able to continue from there on. And there's a lot of fear involved in the imposter syndrome. I think most people would put it there.
No, I agree. Looking at it from a few different angles, I remember reading some article where they said the only thing that researchers found that where that isn't necessarily the point with highly successful people is white men in a certain age range when they're around all the same. And I forget the term, but they use, but essentially it's it's a collective, confidence. And I think that they're sitting more in the ego side. And I would agree, unless they were narcissistic or a sociopath. I think everybody goes through a tinge, even if they're not aware of what it is, because I would say imposter syndrome has definitely become more of a popularized term and discussion probably in the last 10 years or so. I don't really remember it. Maybe before that, time melts away for me. So I'm not sure. But definitely those that are especially highly successful, they feel it, or high achievers. And what I found interesting is that perfectionism and high achievers, or even overachievers, which I do not like that term, they tend to it's this not lesser of two evils, but you're having imposter syndrome. So you're doing all of this, or you're doing all of this, which is helping, they're feeding each other almost. Did you read that?
Yes. I feel like they do feed off one another. And I think a lot of these negative, I don't mind the term overachiever because I've always called myself an overachiever, and I am a recovering perfectionist. So I feel those very heavily, but I definitely think they feed into imposter syndrome, because the second something isn't perfect, you start to feel like nothing you do is any good. And I think for me, if I think back years into the first experience I had with what would be now called imposter syndrome, it was this, I'm trying to achieve a lot. I'm trying to get a lot done. I have this perfectionist mindset. And then the second something doesn't go my way, this is teenage Amanda, it's angsty, preteen, teenage Amanda. The second something doesn't go my way, I automatically feel like I'm a failure. I can't do anything. And it just spirals with, hormones or whatever I was going through at the time. It spirals into this imposter syndrome where I can't do anything right. And that everyone's going to know that I'm a fraud, and they're all going to laugh at me. Oh, like a scene from Carrie. I feel like that's
forever.
That was awesome. Halloween forever. So I think that's sort of where it stems in this imposter syndrome for me anyway. That's where it kind of started. But as I've gotten older, not that much older, but older, I think that it's morphed, and I have stopped feeling it the way I felt it back in the day. because now I recognize what it is. And as soon as I start feeling it, I basically just try to get out of my own head, because a lot of what imposter syndrome really is just this ego inside your head telling you something that actually has no validity in the world. It's not a real thing. And telling yourself you're a charlatan or a fraud, like, yeah, sometimes you are. I mean, if your profession is con artist, then yeah, maybe you're going to have a lot of imposter syndrome. And I don't know what you can do about that. Again, if you're a psychopath, sociopath, like, yeah, you're going to have some different issues than I do. But if you can continue to tell yourself that realistically you are not all the negative things you think about yourself, and I think this is common across a lot of people. And I would say, even like you said, last 10 years, if we talked about ourselves, if we talk to other people the way we talk to ourselves, no one would be our friend.
Nobody
We're
would be
so mean to ourselves. If I messed up a middle school or high school history project and then told the person next to me that, oh, you were horrible at it, you're never going to amount to anything because you had a typo on this one report, and I just went crazy, I would be at the principal's office more often than not. I mean, I did spend quite a bit of time there anyway, but I would have spent more time there for legitimate reasons. So I think that really, what I want people to know about imposter syndrome from my side of things, what I try to impart to my clients, is that it's in your head. And yes, it is a real feeling, and you really, you feel that emotion, you feel that inadequacy, but it's not real. It's just something that it's a negativity that you're telling yourself. And has like teeny tiny pieces, like foundational pieces that are based in reality, but your brain just goes out of control. And so I think it's that overcoming that negativity and reminding yourself of all the good things you did and all the good things that got you to where you are, that need
Absolutely.
to outshadow that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. I keep hearing in my head the fear, false emotions appearing real. I know there's a couple of different ways to like say that, but that's something that I keep hearing as you're speaking. And it's funny, and in our intro, we talked a little bit about our background. And when I started learning about imposter syndrome, I was like, okay, where is this coming from? And really mine was rooted from my young years as well, of like not feeling good enough, not feeling accepted, feeling like a fraud. And this comes from being adopted, having an abusive household, like a really abusive household. And so trying to deflect when I went to school or hide that, like I didn't want people to know who I truly was. I didn't know who I truly was. And this was young, like, and it's incredible, like how fast forward, and I've done a lot of self-work. So for those of you just tuning in, like you'll learn, like both Amanda and I have put in a lot of self-work. I've been doing it for years, really deep work to heal a lot of crap because of my childhood, but also karmic things, etc. And as I navigate, the imposter syndrome, like everything kind of came back up to say, okay, like this is why you felt this way. And it's like the implicit and explicit beliefs, right? It's the subconscious and the conscious mind that are feeding into this, to this fear. And a lot of times, because I'm definitely can be sometimes a fake it till you make it to like get myself through, because that's all I could muster up. And with imposter syndrome, I definitely see the points where I was actually doing it, feeding the imposter syndrome versus feeding the healing through that. Fast forward, mid 40s now, and seeing like, okay, where I could have made changes. And I think, going back to like some of the changes that I could have made is one, surround myself with the right people. I think that when you are surrounding yourself with the right people who see you for you and support you in the way that you need to be supported, it can really help you see a different side of you, right? So trying to see yourself through different people's eyes. And I can remember points in my life where I had people who helped me learn that. And as recent as 10, 15 years ago, like to learn to have grace and compassion for myself, to understand where certain little nuances came from, including my perfectionism, which I think was probably about 15, 20 years ago. I did the work. I understand the root of it. Like it was a protector for me. And so it was a survival mechanism. And then learning, I think that the biggest thing is to learn to be in control of the things and foresee them coming versus to allow them to be in control and lead and direct you where it is. But yeah, I see, it manifesting in the self-doubt that I've had, in the sabotaging of my own success. And I know there are people listening, especially people that know us, and they're like, what do you mean? Like, I can remember having these conversations, and yes, no matter how much I've accomplished, I know I've held myself back. I have not done things or played small. And a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it has to do with imposter syndrome. And it's something that I know that I'm still to this day. And I'm thinking of, like, this, I joined this exclusive business club here. I'm around like all these extremely wealthy people, high society, like really accomplished. And I'm 46 years old at this point, and I'm sitting there and I feel like a damn 12-year-old, like sitting there like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, why am I here? I don't belong here. And it was just like this moment of, no, like, I busted my ass. I deserve to be here. Like and it's, anyway, I'm babbling about this. I feel like I could babble about imposter syndrome forever, but it's interesting to watch, because it never goes away. You always have to navigate it. You always have to look at it. And different things can trigger it. But yeah, it's been interesting to navigate this journey.
But I think it's really, and you brought this up about having that system of support, but they're not yes people, because you need a system of support who can call you out on your crap, who can literally say, you are living in scarcity right now. You don't know what you're talking about. You are just making stuff up to create drama in your life that doesn't need to be there. And you need people to look honestly at your life who know you and who accept you for who you are, to call you on that. And to say, and you might really hate what they have to say, and you might not talk to them for a little bit, and then they end up being right. And then you have to like get off your pride and then decide to talk to them again once you realize that they were totally right, and they're not going to hold it against you, but they might. I mean, there's a lot of that give and take in that relationship, but you want to have people on your team who will challenge you when you need to be challenged, but while also maintaining support throughout. So even if they push back and they challenge you and they tell you you're wrong, it doesn't mean they're not supporting you, if it's the right team, if it's the right
100%
group
agree.
of support that you have. And yeah, imposter syndrome is going to be there forever, because unless you're a sociopath and have no concept of any accountability in the world, you're going to feel it in some way, shape, or form. The challenge, or the solution, I think, is to recognize it when it's happening, to dive deep enough in your body and in your soul and your mind and just your personality to recognize when it's coming up, because it will come in different forms for different people. So some people, it's really the perfectionism that takes over. Sometimes it's a procrastination that takes over. There are different things that will feed into how you deal with imposter syndrome and how it manifests in you, what triggers that imposter syndrome. So you have to kind of dive deep into what causes it for you, recognize it when it starts, and nip it in the bud right away, because it's so easy to spiral in imposter syndrome, because it is created by your own fears and your own self-doubt. And so it's very easy to spiral because it's not external. You're infinite inside, and it's infinitely going to spiral if you let it. And I think that's the key to overcoming imposter syndrome, is that self-work and that deep work to pull it out of you, or at least recognize the triggers when they're coming and make adjustments to whether it's your schedule or just your mental state as you go to combat that, because it's a death spiral for your business if you approach your business and or your life always assuming that you aren't worth having it, that you aren't worth success.
Yeah, several things that you said there is, one is there's two sides of it, and I'm going to come back to that. But you were just saying, like, setting up your business in your life based on that. Think of it like you're setting up on on a shaky foundation, or on a foundation that's could snap at any time. Right. And that actually is one of the things about imposter syndrome, that people feel like, they could be found out at any time. Right. And so the perfectionism keeps people at bay, keeps them, far enough away that they can't see your flaws. Like, there's all these different things. So it's really interesting that you said that, because it is important to do the self work. It is important to surround ourselves with the right people. It is important to find compassion, also knock ourselves off the pedestal. Like, we'll talk about probably a lot, because I believe in this, us, like, actually saying, what, this is my mistakes. This is who I am, that transparency piece, because everybody else is feeling it. Going back to something else is like, there's kind of like almost two sides of the imposter syndrome. You have those who play small and that have more of, we'll say play small, and that necessarily like the doubt, even though they can look very confident on the outside, that doubt on the inside really does rule. And then you have those who are very egocentric and that sit very high on their pedestal, and are only surrounded by themselves. Right. And so figuring out, like, and we can float in between both, the egocentric or the not egocentric, imposter syndrome, and to feel both of them. Like, I know when I'm kind of sitting on more of the pedestal or the egocentric, I pull myself off. I don't sit on that one that often, but definitely I can be put into times where I just like close up everything around me. I try to, well, I don't try it. It happens naturally. Like, it's like I'm sitting in ego more. So it might be more about like, what about me, or like I'm important or whatever. And it's almost like I don't necessarily believe what's coming out sometimes. And then the other side, or I feel it, and there's some behind the scenes, or the other side where, we play small and don't necessarily, and again, this is all interpreted by yourself. Like, my playing small might be very different than somebody else's playing small. Because I can tell you, like, we're here being honest, like, imposter syndrome, hands down, I'm still dealing with it, will never go away. And how mine mostly manifests is I have played small. I've stepped back. I have not stepped forward in a way that could position me in different ways to be able to take, or receive, or to give, or to be able to accomplish really what I could have. Right. If that makes sense. So being mindful also of like, do you sit in imposter syndrome from more of an ego standpoint, or do you sit in it from more of, a non-ego standpoint? Because that will also help you learn like what your reactions are in those moments, and how to kind of like, and Amanda, you said this earlier, like how to foresee yourself before you get there, before you're getting into there, and how you can mitigate it, or, detour it altogether, falling into that mindset.
Yeah. And so for me, if you want to talk, we're all about action here. If you want to talk about action steps, dealing around imposter syndrome, what I would suggest is, if you know that that's something that is a problem for you, something that limits you in your business, in your personal life, and in your relationships, whatever, and wherever, think back to the last time it hit you hard, because it's really hard to deal with it when you're in it. It's really hard to see any logic when you're in it. So think back to a time when it did hit you hard, and try to deconstruct it and find the trigger. So was it something that failed, or was it a success that you had and then you were worried about losing it? Like, what was it that put you in that spiral? Like, what exactly? And that's
that you can look at, not that not an outside force, but look at you, like because I can hear people say, well, so-and-so did this and that's what made me do it. Well, no, you had choice in that. You had free will.
Yes.
So yeah, look at your part in it.
Yes, for sure. I mean, if that one coworker is a constant trigger for you, what is it about that one coworker that triggers something in you, because they're just living their own life. They don't have anything to do with you. They don't even know that they're affecting you in any way, shape, or form. So if you feel like the trigger is someone or some constant action that is happening to you, reverse it and think about what about that situation makes you trigger to think that it's some outside force. So because no one can make you feel anything. So you are making yourself feel imposter syndrome. Nobody else did that. Yes, someone might have triggered it, but what is it about that trigger that they have that made you think that way? Because imposter syndrome is inside. It is not something someone puts on you. It is internal, not external. So if there's something that you feel triggers you, and we'll talk about this a lot in the podcast about that internal dialogue that you're going to have as a business owner, as just a productive human. So think about those external forces, really look back at your last big case of imposter syndrome and try to dissect what it is about the situation, your personal or your personal life at the time, the outside influences, people that you had in your life at the time, and what that means about how you processed it. It's not that somebody else was to blame, because imposter syndrome is 100% an internal feeling. It is not imposed upon you by someone else. It's not like somebody hit you in the head with a frying pan and it's the fault of the frying pan and the person holding it. It's inside.
Absolutely. And then once you've done that, then figure out, do you need to heal from it? Is there something you can put in place of it? It may be a mantra or affirmation. Do you need to get out of a situation? Maybe it's just something that it's an environmental trigger that's making you have that, because essentially you can have outside triggers that activate it, but it's like Amanda said, it's truly you, and make the change to mitigate or avoid it, or heal from it. I think with imposter syndrome, there's a lot of healing involved.
And it's not necessarily make the change, it's make the choice to make the change, because the change isn't going to happen right away. There's a lot of action steps that we're going to recommend and that we have implemented in our own lives that take time. This podcast may be a short one, as all of them will be, but that doesn't mean everything happens in a short time. You gotta do the work.
Yeah, you do have to do the work.
Absolutely. But with all this work comes a lot of really great results. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry about that.
No, we're always going to give you an action. All right. Well, I think it's about time, Amanda, that we already wrap this one up. 20 minutes goes fast. I think we might be over, but all right.
We could talk forever.
Absolutely. So catch us on our next podcast. This is Lynn.
And this is Amanda. Go get after it.
That's right. See you next time, everybody.